Welcome to the Your Take podcast. Welcome back. Again, we're going to be jumping in and doing our preview and predictions for the Eastern Conference. I think the Eastern Conference definitely is a lot weaker at the bottom compared to the West. I personally don't even see the 7 or 8 seed in the East are really that relevant. I think. Yeah, I know earlier in this week we did a whole conversation about the 8 seed in the Western Conference. I think talking who's going to win between Brooklyn and Washington isn't even a discussion worth having at this point. But looking at my projected standings at the end of when it's all said and done, I have Milwaukee still finishing in first. I have them going 6-2. I have Toronto and Boston finishing second and third, each going 5-3. I have Miami going 4-4 to get the 4 seed. I have the Sixers jumping the Pacers into the 5 seed, going 5-3 in their 8 games. Indiana 6-4, going 4-4, and then Orlando going 4-4 to get the 7 seed, and Brooklyn going 2-6, finishing in the 8 seed, and ultimately beating the Wizards in the play-in game. So, what do you have, Justin?
Well, unsurprisingly, I have Milwaukee retaining the top spot. I think it's just going to be too hard for anyone to catch them. I do think there is a very small chance that if the Celtics hit the ground very aggressively with their fairly easy schedule, basically if they beat Milwaukee in their first game back, then they have a chance to take the 2nd seed. But I think it's a much safer assumption that they're going to be locked into the 3rd seed. I think Philadelphia, with the cakest schedule, I think in the East, is going to end up in the 4th. I think Indiana will probably be after them if Oladipo is playing to the level we would like to see him playing at, but there's a very good chance it'll end up being Miami instead if he's not.
I also know Sabonis got hurt as well a couple days ago.
Oh, I forgot about that. I didn't even take that into account. Okay, so we're going to flip that then. Miami takes a spot then. Yeah. And then, as you said, it's almost pointless. I think Orlando is going to stay in the 7th seed, and I don't see how Washington is going to get in there, though someone made the joke on Twitter pretty recently about what teams were doing in the bubble when they first got there, and when they came to Brooklyn, they said, meeting their teammates for the first time.
Yeah.
So there is a chance that, a very hungry Wizards team, I guess, maybe with a fairly difficult schedule, could possibly leapfrog them. Well, not leapfrog them, but force the play-in game. But I doubt it, and no one really cares. Not even them.
No, yeah. Bradley Beal's not even playing for Brooklyn. KD, Kyrie are obviously both sitting when they probably, at least one of them probably could have really given it all if they really were invested in the season. So what do your first round playoff matchups look like? Who do you have winning, and who's like a team you think could potentially make an upset or make some noise in that first round?
Well, I don't think anyone is going to be surprised to hear that the 1-8 matchup is going to go Milwaukee's way. No matter who ends up in that last slot, it's obviously Milwaukee. Toronto, Orlando, I think is the next series for the way I'm envisioning things to play out. Pretty obvious there. I'll say Toronto just in case it's not obvious to somebody who's listening. And then things start to get a little bit interesting. Boston. I had Miami, but we'll say Indiana now. And frankly speaking, I would rather they end up playing. I'm gonna have to rethink all of this now. I'd rather they are going to play Indiana, even with Oladipo, because they've been a lot more successful against Indiana historically in the postseason. This season, I think they've been more successful against Miami in the regular season than Indiana, but I do think that they're going to have some difficulty integrating Oladipo, and particularly now that we're talking with Sabonis having, was it patellar tendonitis or something like that? Yeah, that's going to make them a lot less flexible as a team. They won't be able to play as small. They'll have to play Turner a lot more. Even if he is able to play, they'll have to play him less just to watch out for that tendonitis flaring back up again. Beyond that, I think that we're going to see Boston emerge from either of those matchups, though I do think Miami would be the much tougher of the two. And then for the 5-6 matchup, or no, 4-5 matchup, excuse me, Philadelphia and Miami, that I hadn't thought about. I think that would be a very fun
I agree.
Just because of the dynamics, of Butler's leaving. that one is like almost a coin flip for me. When I had Philadelphia matched up with Indiana, that was an easy win for Philadelphia. I'll put Philadelphia in 7 for Miami, but I had them for Philadelphia in 6 versus the Pacers. Um, Beyond that, I think I had the Bucks versus the Sixers, and I had Milwaukee taking that in 6. I had Toronto versus Boston. Boston takes that in 6. And then for the Eastern Conference Finals, I had Milwaukee versus Boston. Little homer hat on. I'll admit it. Um, they're not winning, the Celtics, unless Kemba is very close to or at 100% by this point in the playoffs. There's no chance. Then they might be able to win in a 7-game series, but I'm assuming without Kemba that it'll be a 6-game Milwaukee victory.
Yeah, I think it's really pretty similar rankings or pretty similar playoff bracket. I got Milwaukee sweeping Brooklyn in the first round, Toronto winning in 5 against Orlando. I have Boston beating Indiana in 6. I also think the Sixers Heat matchup is the toughest matchup to pick and the hardest matchup that we're going to see in the first round in the East, possibly in the entire NBA playoffs. I know the Sixers, I think, went 1-2 against the Heat in the regular season, and I remember watching at least 2 of the 3 games either went to overtime or were decided by a point or 2 or less. I think it's really going to come down to, I think the Sixers are the biggest question mark out of any team in Orlando. They're the only team that we really know of that's actively changing the entire offensive system. It looks like they're going to slide Simmons to power forward, play Shake Milton at point guard. We've seen Simmons taking shots in some video, but we've seen that before, and in the past it hasn't really amounted to anything in actual games. So I think that until I watch a Sixers game, whether it's a scrimmage or regular season game, and see Simmons actively being aggressive shooting the ball, I think it's a whole lot of nothing, these videos that are coming out now. I do think that I have Philadelphia beating Miami in 6 games. I think that ultimately the size the Sixers have is going to give Miami a lot of problems. I think also the playoff experience favors the Sixers a ton. Obviously, Embiid and Simmons have been in the playoffs the last 2 years. Horford has been in a ton of playoff series. Tobias got playoff action last year. And I think you look at the Heat, outside of Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo has never been a starter on a playoff team. And the rest of the team, Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, Myers Leonard have not had a whole lot of playoff experience. I think the bench kind of definitely favors the Heat a little bit. You got Andre Iguodala, who obviously Finals MVP. You have Goran Dragic, who's been in his fair share of playoff moments for the Heat. But I think that ultimately the size the Sixers have is going to really be tough, especially when the game slows down in the playoffs and we have more half-court offensive sets and more focus on stopping the key players. I think that could definitely give the Sixers an advantage. I think the Heat are going to have a tough time matching up with Embiid and Simmons and all the size that the Philly brings. I do think that whoever does come out, so I have the Sixers coming out, but I think whoever comes out of that series actually might be the toughest series that the Bucks get in the Eastern Conference. Well, specifically talking about the Heat first, if they played at the Bucks in the second round, the Bucks give up the second or third most threes in the entire league, and the Heat are first in the league in 3-point percentage. You got Duncan Robinson at 45%, Tyler Hero 39%, Dragic 38%, Nunn 37%. Even the stretch bigs for the Heat off the bench, Kelly Olynyk and Myers Leonard each shoot around 43% each. They brought in Jay Crowder, who can shoot threes. Andre Iguodala can shoot threes. It really depends, but I think that they're almost like the Rockets of the East, where again you have Butler kind of driving, similar to like what Harden or Russell Westbrook do, and then kicking out to all the 3-point shooters around the hoop. And the ability to go small, they can pull Bam Adebayo off the floor and put in Myers Leonard, who is definitely like a stretch big, who can, like I said, is shooting 43% from 3 as well. So I think that the 3-point shooting can definitely be tough for Milwaukee. And I also think defensively, or the Heat also went 2-1 against the Bucks in the regular season. And looking at defensive matchups between the Bucks and other teams, Giannis was 10 for 28 against Embiid, and Simmons is also an elite defender. And for the Heat, Giannis actually was 8 for 23 against Bam Adebayo in the regular season. So I think that those two teams definitely have great matchups against Milwaukee. I had Milwaukee beating the Sixers in 6 games in the Eastern Conference semifinals, and I have the Celtics beating the Raptors in 7 games. in the Eastern Conference semifinals. I think that the firepower. I think the Raptors have been great in the regular season. It's just really hard to. We haven't really seen a team go that deep in the playoffs before without a top 10 player, and I think that it's hard to really say the same about the Raptors this year too. And then the Eastern Conference Finals, I have Bucks versus Celtics. And I think the biggest problem the Celtics are going to run into is a Giannis stopper. Look at the regular season. It looks like Daniel Tice. Giannis was 7 for 9 against Daniel Tice, 4 for 6 against Marcus Smart. I think Tatum probably was the best, but it was like 1 for 4, pretty small sample size. I think that's going to be.
Shemi is good in limited minutes against him, particularly as a help defender, but he's not enough.
Semi Ojeleye?
Shemi Ojeleye. Yeah. He's not enough. He's good for short bursts, particularly to help double, but then he's an offensive black hole. He just doesn't shoot. So what you gain on one end, you lose on the other. So unless he starts shooting the three more, we really need a Kemba Walker really to make up for that.
Something I talked about on a different podcast, but it was not with a person who was kind of more of the inside workings of the Celtics. I'd be really curious to see a Celtics quote unquote death lineup where I know they play Tice at center now, but I think it'd be actually interesting to see what happens if they played Tatum at center and then went with Kemba, Smart, Jaylen Brown, and Gordon Hayward. I don't know I haven't really tried that much, but I think it could be interesting to see.
Now I have toyed around with a very similar death, I guess you could say, lineup, which is really just their best players. And instead, you keep the usual starting lineup the same and then take Marcus Smart from the second unit and put him at center, since he is actually capable, at least in short stints, of guarding much bigger centers. This obviously wouldn't work against a lot of lineups, but I do think that if you just wanted to go crazy on the offensive end, it could be pretty interesting.
I also think in that Raptors series, if they do something like that, I think you'd almost force Marc Gasol off the floor just because of he's not going to have the speed to keep up with any of those guys.
He might now, though. I have not seen him. Have you seen him skinny? He's another skinny guy.
I actually have not.
I really want to see him play.
I have not seen that.
Got to see that.
Yeah. So the Bucks, I think the Bucks really are the strongest team in the East. I think that there's definitely the gap between the Bucks and everyone else is a lot bigger than what we see in the Western Conference. For me personally, some of the things that stick out about the Bucks. Wesley Matthews replaced Malcolm Brogdon in the starting lineup this year, and I think a lot of people would have expected that to hurt them. But I think that giving Giannis more ball, more point guard kind of possessions without Brogdon on the court and having another shooter in Wesley Matthews, the differential for the starting lineup for the Bucks jumped from plus 6.3 to plus 19.3, which is pretty remarkable. I think the Bucks. The playoff advantage they have are they're number 2 in half-court offense and number 2 in half-court defense, so they don't rely on the breakaway and fast breaks as much and transition as some other teams.
I would like to see Giannis at center more than just a few random minutes here and there, too. I know it's not really something that they're doing in this iteration, but I would like to see it just to see how it works.
Do you have any surprise teams? I know you said that you think the Celtics can make a run at the finals, but if any of the Raptors, Sixers, Heat, Pacers that you think could, if they get hot and have the right breaks, could make it to Eastern Conference Finals?
Raptors and Heat both. Heat, for the reasons you outlined, they are really the Houston of the East. And if they, for example, this is just an idea here. If they met up before the conference finals with the Bucks, just because of how they invite people to shoot the three, it's part of their schema. And the Heat are one team out there who actually could really get hot. So if they came out blazing and got them down 0-2, they really could possibly sneak up on. In the bubble, there's no teams, fan bases present to scream and yell and get you back into it. So once you're kind of feeling behind the 8-ball, it's going to be curious. I think we may see more sweeps than usual this year because of that dynamic. And then Toronto, they're the reigning champs. If we can see from Siakam something similar to the player he was before the break, with some more rest for that groin issue, then we might see somebody who is borderline a top 10 player, because the numbers that Siakam was putting up early in the season was top 10 player-ish. It didn't last because of the injury, and it may not ever come back. But if he can play like that player, even like 90% of that player, then we might be in for another scary monster coming out of the East that no one was really expecting. But beyond that, those are really my two. I think Toronto and
Yeah,
Miami.
I think when you talk about the Raptors, if they can bring, they're the number 2 defense in the league. I think if they can bring that to the playoffs, they can slow the game down. I know outside of Siakam, Marcus Gasol's an elite defender. OG Anunoby's proven to be a great defender. Fred VanVleet, Kyle Lowry, they have just great defenders all over the floor. And Nick Nurse, he's personally my would be my coach of the year pick. I don't think anyone expected the Raptors to be the 2 seed in the East
No.
after losing Kawhi. And if they can bring the same defense that we saw in the regular season, that would give them the best chance of making noise and making a run, like you said.
Yeah, we all thought that they were going to break up the team, and that seems really stupid now.
Yeah, I know. There was talks about their general manager kind of playing it out. So with Kawhi leaving, they have a bunch of guys they become free agents this season. But now they'll probably have to look into re-signing a bunch of those guys.
Might as well. I mean, kind of hard to convince yourself to tear down the second best team in the
Yeah.
conference.
I know we talked pretty much strictly about the Eastern Conference, but if I had to ask you for your finals prediction, who would you have coming out of the West to face Milwaukee, and who would you see winning it all?
Okay, so if they don't get surprised by Portland in the first round, as we have discussed off camera previously, there is a decent chance for the same reason, kind of, you get down in a hole unexpectedly. It can put you in a dangerous situation with no fan base to kind of lift you up. The Lakers could find themselves behind the ball, facing the Portland Trailblazers in the first round. But if they don't, they're my favorite to make it out of the West. I could just as easily see the depth of the Clippers carry them to the finals. It's going to be one of the two Los Angeles teams, almost certainly. Yeah. I'm going to go with the Lakers just because I think it's stupid to bet against LeBron until he proves us wrong. I do think that a Lakers versus Bucks, I'm assuming it's going to be the Bucks coming out of the East. I think that they'll lose. I think the Bucks will win their first championship, which will be critical for retaining Giannis Antetokounmpo.
So I have the Clippers coming out of the West and ultimately knocking off the Bucks in 6 games. I'm just kind of curious about the comment you just made. Do you how dependent do you think the Bucks are on winning a finals in the next 2 years to keep Giannis? Do you think just finals appearances will not cut it?
They need to have a good showing. They need to do better than a gentleman's sweep. They need to win at least 2 games in the finals for him to be convinced to stay. They made some very questionable moves recently, basically to save money, which is the dumbest thing you could possibly do when you have such a generational talent on your roster. But that's what they did, and now they're going to have to prove that their plan was a good one to him to realistically be able to keep him. And I think as long as you get more than 1 win in the finals, that'll be enough.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that I would be upset if Giannis left the Bucks personally. If he goes to like all the Warriors rumors would be just disaster for the league. But I really hope that Giannis stays in Milwaukee long term. When it comes to the salary cap issue, I think it's super hard for a team like Milwaukee, definitely being much more smaller market to be able to.
They'll make the money. They'll make the money.
I mean, like
it'll be a big expenditure.
That is true.
But if they do that well, they'll make the money. If they won't, I get it. But they should assume, if you can't compete for a title, I think then you probably have your franchise in the wrong place.
Yeah, I agree.
That's like if you get a talent like Giannis, and you're still not good enough, and you have another top 10 player on your roster in Middleton, maybe you don't want to be running. At least maybe they still want to have it there, but maybe they need new owners. I don't know. Maybe they need someone who can afford to surround that kind of talent with the secondary talent they need.
Justin, before we go, all teams in the NBA, we're not just talking East now, if I ask you about what is any kind of surprising prediction or projection you would make for the restart, what would it be?
Ooh, surprising thing for the restart. That the players all like what the NBA is doing in a fanless environment for the most part. I guess that's already been disproven with Lou Will complaining about the crowd noise, but I think that if that is the worst of it, we have done pretty well with this restart.
Yeah, I definitely think Adam Silver's been it's been remarkable what the NBA has been able to do, especially compared to some of the other pro sports leagues in the U.S. that have it's not been as easy, and the plans that they have in place
or safe.
Yeah, I was gonna say those plans don't really seem as secure. There's definitely a lot more risk. I know baseball just starting up; they're traveling back and forth to every single city across the country. It'll be interesting to see.
Toronto's club got kicked out of their own neighborhood because the local government was like, no, you are not doing that. Nope, not with Americans.
Hockey's doing it well, I think, putting all the teams in Canada and doing the bubble system as well. It should be interesting. And then football, I think, is also similar to baseball, where they just seem to be a little too relaxed and not really taking this as seriously as they should. But thank you so much, Justin. It was great having you come on. This was a great discussion, great conversation. We're really looking forward to the season kicking off this week. Be sure to tune in next week. We're going to be doing some previews and discussions about our thoughts and reactions to the opening week of games. So tune in next week. Have a good week, and hopefully everyone enjoys the NBA games that we're finally going to be seeing this upcoming weekend.